Some stories never make the headlines, some victims remain nameless, and some mysteries fade before they're ever solved. If you're drawn to the strange and unexplained, from cryptids and aliens to hauntings, true crime, and everything in between, you need to check out Unknown, Unsolved, Unseen. Hosted by Frank and Sage, this podcast dives into a plethora of unexplained phenomena. They research, discuss, and share their own opinions on stories that linger in the shadows, from the unsolved to the unbelievable. Listen to Unknown, Unsolved, Unseen wherever you get your podcasts, because every story, no matter how strange, deserves to be told.
Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that Down the Crooked Path is researched and recorded in Niagara Falls, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Attawandaron, and the Mississauga of Credit First. This land has been home to Indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and we recognize their enduring connection. We are grateful to share these stories on their lands that carry their histories, and we encourage our listeners to reflect on the past, present, and future of the land they call home. Welcome, wanderers, to Journey Down the Crooked Path, a place where the stories are stranger, the shadows stretch longer, and the things that go bump in the night might just be listening. I'm Amanda Joy, your guide into the eerie, the forgotten, and the downright bizarre. Here, we step off the well-lit roads of Canadian Creepies and venture into the murky corners of history, folklore, and the unexplained, where the whispers grow louder and the truth is never quite what it seems. So let's take a deep breath, watch your step, and whatever you do, don't look back. Once you start down the crooked path, you never know what might follow. The Bermuda Triangle, a name that hangs heavy with salt and superstition. Somewhere between the sunlit shores of Florida and the coral-cloaked depths of Bermuda and Puerto Rico's vibrant coastlines, this stretch of ocean has become more myth than map. Over the decades, whispers have swirled like sea mist around this region. Tales of missing planes, ghost ships, and compasses that spin with no reason. Pilots report radio silence before vanishing. Sailors speak of shimmering fog that feels sentient. Even as technology advances, the mystery hasn't faded. It's only grown more intricate. What's strange, though, is the Bermuda Triangle is just one of several places on Earth where reality seems to fray at the edges. Across the globe, certain regions seem to invite unusual occurrences. Areas where navigation instruments behave erratically, vessels vanish without explanation, and stories linger far longer than evidence allows. The Bermuda Triangle may be the most famous, but it's not alone. Near Japan, the Devil's Sea has its own catalog of unexplained disappearances. In Vermont, hikers entering the Bennington Triangle sometimes don't return. The Michigan Triangle has recorded aircrafts dropping from radar with no clear cause. These places stand out because they challenge what we expect from the natural world. They're not merely geographical curiosities, they represent permanent anomalies that remain resistant to straightforward explanation. Canada isn't typically the first place that comes to mind when talk turns to disappearances and mysterious geography, but hidden within its vast wilderness is a region that quietly carries similar stories. Deep in the rugged terrain of British Columbia, reports have surfaced over the years of people vanishing without a trace. Aircrafts going off radar, and unusual weather patterns that defy explanation. Though it hasn't received the global attention of its southern counterpart, this area has earned a reputation among locals and researchers alike for being more than just an untamed landscape. It's a place where the familiar rules seem to loosen and where the unexplained has become part of the surrounding lore. What sets British Columbia's so-called triangle apart isn't just the occasional disturbances, it's the pattern. Stories don't cluster in one spot, they ripple across a region with oddly consistent boundaries. Locals talk about a stretch where direction seems to blur and time feels slow. In some instances, aircrafts veer wildly off course with no technical explanation. Although rescue efforts thoroughly examine an entire area, certain incidents remain unexplained, with no identifiable environmental cause, only deserted paths and abruptly lost signals. Consequently, the region has become known less for sensational events and more for its quietness, which ultimately generates more questions than conclusions. In southwestern British Columbia, there is a loosely defined region that has drawn whispers for decades. Anchored by the towns of Kamloops to the north, Whistler to the west, and Hope to the south, the triangle traced between these points covers a vast stretch of terrain marked by wild elevation changes, deep valleys, and long corridors of untamed forests. It's a landscape both breathtaking and unforgiving. Unlike the Bermuda Triangle, which spans across open oceans, BC's triangle is carved through stone and fir. Mountain passes wind like veins through remote territory, where weather patterns can shift without warning. Clear skies give way to blinding fog or awful snowfalls. The density of the forest here isn't just visual, it swallows sound, signal, and sometimes entire search operations. It's this layered natural complexity that gives the region its reputation, not a place where myth crashes against waves, but where the reality bends quietly under moss and mist. What they share, though, is a lingering sense of uncertainty. Neither triangle offers satisfying answers. Both provoke theories and stories that have persisted throughout generations. Whether it's sea currents or shifting terrain, magnetic interference, or something not yet understood, the questions remain, and the boundaries between explanation and legend stay thin. On October 1957, Herman Jongerhuis, a skilled outdoorsman and hunter, set out into the wilderness near the town of Hope, British Columbia. He was familiar with the land, had experience navigating difficult terrains, and was not the sort of person who typically drew concern when heading out alone. But when he failed to return that evening, a search was quickly organized. Over the following days, volunteers and rescue teams scoured the forested hills and valleys where he was believed to have traveled. Despite clear weather and well-coordinated efforts, no trace of him was found. Weeks passed, then months. It was as though the forest had swallowed him completely. But the mystery deepened when his remains were eventually discovered, lying in an area that had already been combed through during the initial search. Not hidden under debris, not buried beneath fresh snowfall, simply placed in the clearing, almost as if they had appeared after the fact. No evidence of injury stood out, no gear was scattered, no signs of struggle, animal activity, or accident explained the delay. The location had been walked repeatedly by search teams, and yet there he was. That detail, where he was found, continues to trouble those who remember the case. It's not just that he vanished, it's that when he was found, his presence defied the certainty of prior observations. And in the quiet contradiction, the story of Herman Jongerhuis entered a long ledger of the triangle's unresolved questions. In the spring of 1960, near the remote edges of Red Lake, British Columbia, a 2-year-old girl named Betty Jean Masters was reported missing. Her family had been spending time outdoors, and like many families familiar with the lifelong BC's wild corridors, they weren't alarmed when Betty Jean wandered a short distance from the group. It was broad daylight, the terrain was familiar, the outing was routine, but within moments, she was gone. A frantic search unfolded, first by her parents, and then it quickly expanded to local authorities, volunteers, and search and rescue teams. The surrounding woods were combed with precision, marked off in grids, and covered from the ground and the air. And there were no signs of wildlife activity, no traces of clothing, no sound carried on the wind, not even a footprint. What disturbed investigators the most was how sudden and total the disappearance had been, and in the location that, by all accounts, should have offered clues. Despite extensive efforts over days and weeks, no trace of Betty Jean was ever recovered. No leads ever emerged. The case faded from headlines, but lingered in memory, a quiet tragedy that felt disproportionate to its setting. The Red Lake region, not far from the outer boundaries of BC's Mystery Triangle, had never been considered dangerous or difficult in that way. And yet, the disappearance of the child, so complete and confounding, added another layer to the growing pattern. People vanish without reason, and the land offering no explanation in return. In the summer of 1966, a young boy named Clancy O'Brien vanished in Green Lake, a quiet spot nestled within the dense wooded interior of British Columbia. He had been out with his family, enjoying the kind of day familiar to locals: warm air, calm waters, and the wilderness that felt more inviting than remote. Clancy wandered off briefly, not far from the group, but within minutes, he was gone. The search began quickly. Local residents joined authorities, combing the shoreline and surrounding the forest with dogs, boats, and aircrafts. The terrain wasn't especially treacherous, and the weather posed no obstacles, yet no evidence surfaced, no tracks, no clothing, not even a broken branch to suggest the direction that he may have gone. It was as though Clancy had stepped into the trees and disappeared completely. Days turned into weeks, and then into silence, and the case settled into the margins, never officially closed, but untouched to resolution. No suspects, no theories that held up under scrutiny. The lake remained still. And Green Lake, once a place for quiet getaways, now carried a shadow for those who remembered the search. Clancy's disappearance is one of the earlier cases linked to British Columbia's mysterious triangle, unsettling not because of drama or spectacle, but because of how little there was to explain. It's a story marked by absence of noise, of clues, of reason, and it continues to echo quietly in a region that has seen more than its share of unanswered questions. These instances represent only a few of the earliest cases in a long-standing history of missing persons. In recent years, the number of reported cases has continued to increase. In early 2019, Ben Tainer, a working cowboy and ranch manager, rode out near Merritt, British Columbia, to check on cattle in the surrounding hills. He was experienced, well-prepared, and knew the terrain intimately. The ride was routine, part of the rhythm of life on the ranch. But the next day, his horse was found wandering alone, still saddled and in good condition, without signs of panic or injury. But Ben was gone. The discovery raised immediate concern. A massive search was launched, involving helicopters, drones, ground crew, and even international experts in search and rescue operations. The landscape was combed methodically: open grasslands, steep hills, riverbeds, and tree-covered ridges, but nothing surfaced, no tracks, no gear, not scent trails for the dogs to follow. It was as though he'd vanished moments after dismounting, leaving behind a horse that seemed to offer no clues. What makes Ben's disappearance especially haunting is the clarity surrounding it. His horse wasn't spooked, injured, or found deep in the bush. It was calm, standing in an accessible area, as if waiting. That quiet, unexplained separation between man and animal is what continues to trouble investigators and locals alike. How could someone so familiar with the land simply disappear without weather, wildlife, or terrain offering any explanation? The case remains open: no suspects, no forensic breakthroughs, no reliable sightings. And Ben Tainer's name has since become a part of a growing roster of unresolved disappearances within British Columbia's mysterious triangle. Later in 1920, another chilling case added depth to the growing mystery. Marshall Isway, a 26-year-old from Lethbridge, Alberta, had last been seen in his hometown, reportedly planning a short trip. Days later, his truck was discovered in Darcy, British Columbia, badly burned, abandoned on a rugged backcountry trail, deep within the triangle's bounds. The condition of the truck raised immediate alarm. This was not the kind of accident one would expect from an inexperienced driver or mechanical failure. The scene appeared deliberate, yet there were no signs of Marshall nearby. There were no belongings, no messages, no clear indication of what had led him there. The terrain surrounding the site was remote and difficult to access, often used only by experts, experienced outdoor enthusiasts, and locals with intimate knowledge of the land. Despite coordinated efforts between family, investigators, voluntary search crews, the trail went cold. The RCMP initially considered the circumstances unusual, but did not confirm foul play. Yet to many watching, the abrupt shift from a routine trip in Alberta to a burnt vehicle in the most inaccessible parts of British Columbia felt suspicious. The absence of motive, combined with the eeriness of the location, turned Marshall's case into more than just a missing persons investigation. It became a part of a disturbing pattern. Individuals enter the triangle and don't come back, or being found in ways that defy explanation. Across decades, dozens and dozens of names have joined the ledger of British Columbia's disappearances, tied to the mysterious triangle. Some have been publicly reported, others linger in fragmented accounts from search logs, local news archives, and community memory. While each case is distinct, certain elements continue to repeat, patterns that suggest something more than coincidence. Overall, there are approximately 30-plus cases connected to this area. One of the most unsettling similarities involves the location of recovery. In several instances, bodies were discovered in areas that had been searched multiple times. Places so thoroughly swept that their sudden presence raised questions. Not about the visibility or error, but about the timing of discovery. Another common thread is the abandoned vehicles. Burnt-out trucks deep in the forest, saddled horses left calm and unattended, parked cars with no sign of their owners, each one positioned far off the main road, often near rough forest, service routes few would travel, without purpose. And yet, that's where they ended up. Weather often plays a role too. Clear days turning foggy, calm skies giving way to sudden snowfall. While British Columbia's terrain is known for its volatility, the timing of these shifts seems coincidentally eerie, with moments of the disappearances complicating searches and blurring timelines. Tracking dogs, trusted tools in search and rescue operations, have also filtered within the triangle's bounds. Teams report scent trails that vanish mid-step. The dogs lose focus without environmental cause, and paths that lead nowhere fast. These instances, though not universal, have become part of the larger puzzle. Perhaps most haunting of all is the absence of struggle. Time and again, investigators reveal no signs of foul play, no injury, no signs of panic, yet many cases are still considered suspicious, not because of what's found, but because of how little there is to go on. It is this collection of details, not dramatic on their own, but deeply strange in context, that gives the triangle its lingering mystique. Each case adds a layer. Each commonality makes the quiet terrain feel more deliberate. And with time, the list continues to grow.
Once upon a time, in the land of everyday moments, there lived a sprinkle of magic called icing sugar photography. From sticky cake smash smiles to wind-swept yes moments, they capture the sugar sweet, the beautifully messy, and everything in between. Whether you're a blushing bride or a blooming family, or just want to freeze time for a second, icing sugar photography is your fairy god lens. Visit icingsugarphotography.com and follow along on Instagram at icingsugarphoto. Let your story sparkle, because life is sweet and memories should be too.
British Columbia's triangle doesn't need supernatural elements to be dangerous. Its natural risk alone can explain many tragedies. The region between Kamloops, Whistler, and Hope is defined by steep mountain passes, thick forests, and rapidly changing weather systems. Trails fade, landmarks shift, and one wrong turn can lead even skilled hikers into isolation. Rugged terrain has a way of amplifying mistakes, especially when communication drops and visibility shrinks. Wildlife can also play a role. The triangle sits within habitats for grizzly bears, cougars, and wolves, although attacks are rare. Still, For those traveling alone and quietly off the path, sudden encounters can turn deadly. In most cases, the absence of witnesses or evidence leaves families guessing what happened. And then there's the cold. Even in milder seasons, hypothermia can set in faster than expected, especially when moisture and wind combine. A simple overnight delay or injury might be survivable in other parts of Canada, but in this region, conditions can deteriorate with little warning. Lost hikers often shed layers in confusion, losing the ability to signal, and fade before help arrives. Many of the Triangle's disappearances occur in fair weather, but it's how quickly that weather changes that matters most. Beyond the usual dangers of terrain and weather, some believe that the Triangle's reputation is rooted in subtler environmental phenomenon, anomalies that don't show up on weather forecasts or maps. Magnetic interference is one of the most frequently cited. Several cases involve compasses spinning without reason or navigation equipment having behaved erratically, suggesting fluctuations could distort orientation or signal. Sudden fog banks also raise eyebrows. In certain valleys and passes within the Triangle, mists have been known to form and roll in rapidly, thick enough to erase visibility and sound within seconds. Hikers have described walking into fog that felt oddly contained, almost like stepping through a threshold. There are even accounts of sound distortions. Individuals have reported moments where ambient sound, such as bird calls, footsteps, flowing water, seem to dampen unnaturally or shift direction, making it harder to navigate by ear. Some describe it as disorienting, others unnerving, but it's always fleeting. None of these anomalies are fully understood, and while they aren't proof of anything beyond nature's complexity, they do help explain why this region continues to attract attention, not just for what happens, but for how it feels when things do happen. Even without external threats, the human mind can quickly become a factor in how and why people vanish in the wild. British Columbia's Triangle isn't just physically challenging, it's mentally disorienting. Endless tree lines, repetitive terrain, and the absence of recognizable landmarks can erode a person's sense of direction faster than expected. What begins as a confident hike or routine ride can spiral into confusion with just a few missteps. Disorientation can lead to panic, especially when visibility drops or navigation tools fail. In those moments, people may start making erratic decisions, such as leaving trails, abandoning gear, or heading in directions opposite from safety. It doesn't always take extreme conditions for someone to feel isolated enough to lose their bearings entirely. There's also the possibility, though less common, of voluntary disappearances. Individuals dealing with personal distress have sometimes used remote regions as escape routes, quietly stepping away from their lives without telling others. In a setting as vast and unmonitored as BC's wilderness, it's possible to leave behind almost no trace, and not everyone wants to be found. Psychological factors don't explain every story in the Triangle, but they are an essential part of the broader picture. Nature can distort the senses. The pressure of survival in unfamiliar terrain can warp decision-making. These elements, while quieter than legends, play a real role in why some searches never find resolution. While natural hazards and psychological factors offer grounded explanations, they don't satisfy everyone. For decades, those drawn to the strange and unexplainable have offered more speculative interpretations of the Triangle's unnerving reputation. Ideas that stretch beyond conventional understanding and dig deep into legend, anomaly, and secrecy. Some of the earliest whispers tied to the region's indigenous folklore. Certain First Nations oral history speaks of sacred places in the land where travelers are warned not to linger, areas imbued with spiritual caution rather than superstition. These stories aren't famed as fantasy, but as part of deeper cultural respect for the power and presence of the terrain. In that context, disappearances become not just physical events, but spiritual transgressions, crossing into places not meant for wandering. Paranormal theories build from there. Reports of strange lights above ridgelines, unexplained energy fields, and the feeling of disorientation, where time or space seems briefly altered, fuel ideas of interdimensional slips or thin spots in reality. Some believe the triangle houses a kind of geographic vortex, a place where magnetic energy folds inward, leading to sensory confusion or even displacement. It's not uncommon for bikers to describe sudden chills, silence that feels unnatural, or a lingering feeling of being watched when no one else is present. UFO sightings, though sparse, have still punctuated local lore, particularly near Darcy and upper valleys north of Whistler. Glimpses of fast-moving shapes, lights that behave contrary to aircraft norm, and electrical interferences that have been woven into tales that suggest the triangle may host visitors not native to this planet, or realities beyond our own. Then there are the conspiracy theories, especially the ones tied to missing persons. Some suggest certain disappearances coincide with covert military testing, hidden installations, or data anomalies that have been quietly scrubbed from maps. Remote Forest Service roads and out-of-range radio zones have been flagged by theorists as ideal locations for operations that aren't meant to be found. The burned vehicles, the vanishing signals, feed superstitions that something, not just someone, may be watching, or even manipulating the environment. These theories are not substantiated by verified facts, but remain in the discussion, as many cases present details that cannot be easily explained. The concept of the triangle is associated with patterns that have yet to be resolved. As uncertainties persist between established facts and interpretations, speculations will continue to arise. David Pauldines, a former police detective, has spent the past 2 decades compiling one of the most puzzling connections of missing person cases ever assembled. His work is known as Missing 411. Its research draws attention to particular categories of disappearances, the ones that happen deep in the wilderness, often under circumstances that seem slightly off. They aren't just stories of poor planning or tragic accidents. They are cases that leave seasoned investigators without answers and families with far more questions than closure. Rather than offering direct explanations, David presents patterns. The cases he documents span national parks, remote valleys, and forest ridges where something doesn't quite add up. Victims are often physically capable, experienced in the outdoor, and vanish in areas that don't immediately present danger. Search and rescue efforts sometimes begin within hours, yet yield nothing. Tracking dogs frequently fail to pick up scents, and then, in a handful of stories, remains or personal items are discovered in locations that were previously searched and places that seem inaccessible and make little logical sense. The terrain often plays a role: steep inclines, water sources, and sudden drops in elevation. Weather too becomes suspicious. Clear skies that rapidly turn stormy, fog banks that roll in without warning, conditions that interfere with services more often than they should. Clothing may be missing, found in puzzling arrangements. Some of the disappearances occur near dusk, and time after time, even when foul play is ruled out, the circumstances feel unfinished. British Columbia's triangle fits this profile almost seamlessly. The region between Kamloops, Whistler, and Hope features dense forest, unpredictable weather systems, and terrain that can confound even the most experienced outdoorsmen. Within its bounds, we've seen cases that mirror the very details of David Pauldines' highlights: bodies showing up in previously swept areas, abandoned vehicles and remote locations, sudden meteorological shifts, and silent trails where dogs lose scent entirely. David has included Canada in his mapping of high strangeness clusters. With multiple sites flagging British Columbia and Alberta, the triangle aligns with one of those concentrations. What makes this especially noteworthy isn't the geography, it's the atmosphere of mystery that permeates it. locals speak in hushed tones about strange disappearances. Online forums quietly track new incidences. And each name added to the list strengthens the uneasy possibility that something is happening here that defies simple categorization. Missing 411 doesn't try to solve these cases outright, but it reframes how we look at them by suggesting that mystery itself might be a part of the truth. And in British Columbia's Triangle, that lens offers a striking and unsettling clarity. British Columbia's Triangle has earned a quiet reputation through lived experiences, not just what has been written or broadcasted. Park rangers have shared accounts of GPS devices malfunctioning in areas where the signal should be strong. The search teams remember locations where remains appeared in clearings that had already been checked multiple times. One ranger remarked that the body wasn't simply overlooked. It felt as if it had been placed there after the search. Hikers and campers often describe unusual silence settling over the forest. In certain stretches, birds stop calling. Wind dies down, and sound from the trail seems to disappear. A camper near Green Lake recalled waking inside a tent surrounded by fog, despite clear skies in the forecast. That same morning, they heard steady footsteps circling the tent, although nobody ever appeared. There are accounts of trail markers vanishing or appearing out of place, leading travelers in confusing directions without any sign of tampering. A handful of people mentioned glimpses of motions in the trees, a figure caught just out of focus. Though most speak of these moments with a tone of curiosity rather than fear. Some Indigenous spiritual guides working within local communities mention specific places in the forest that are traditionally approached with caution. They aren't seen as haunted in a Western sense, but as spiritually potent. Places that hold memory and presence beyond our immediate understanding. One guide described the forest as aware of those who move through it and suggests that some areas are best respected from a distance. Urban legends have sprung from these kinds of stories. Drivers tell of lonely stretches of forest roads where they feel a strange pull to stop, as though someone were watching from the tree lines. Above Whistler, an abandoned logging town known as Parkhurst sits quietly under layers of moss and rusted equipment, and visitors speak of a deep silence there that feels intentional. As the trees close in and the trail begins to fade, one truth lingers. This place doesn't offer explanations. The land between Kamloops, Whistler, and Hope remains quiet, but never still. It watches, it holds on to secrets, and with every story, every search, and every unanswered question, its reputation deepens. Though not through spectacle, but silence. What makes this triangle unsettling isn't just the mystery. It's the precision in which the mystery resists to be solved. People vanish, signals cut out, logic falters, and though theories abound, the forest never confirms or denies a single one. Perhaps the real enigma lies in our own need to explain what may never be meant to make sense. Or maybe, in places like these, the strange isn't just something to solve. It's something we're meant to feel. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and remember, the most mysterious places aren't always the ones you see in the map. Sometimes, they're just beyond the edge of the familiar.